With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
We're back to Heard Tell. Okay, he's back, one of our favorites. We lean on these guys, elections-daily.com. We were early adapters to them way back in the day, our friend Eric and company, and this man has been on multiple times on the program. You're going to see him a lot this year, I promise you. They do great work. Joe Szymanski, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, sir. I'm doing well. It's the end of my spring semester here at George Mason. We're just finishing up here. So I'm getting ready to head back home to Pennsylvania by the end of this upcoming week. I'm getting ready to head back home to Pennsylvania, where there's going to be a lot of stuff happening there. But I know we want to focus on another key Midwestern state today with their big primary last night in Ohio.
Yeah, you'll get home just in time to vote, won't you?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Ohio. It was a marquee matchup for all the wrong reasons. Let's start with the Senate race. Back home where I come from, we call that a big old hot mess. Our British friends would call it an omni shambles. I watched your coverage of it on the YouTube channel. You guys do excellent live feeds on these elections nights. I've gotten to watching you folks and your partnership with Decision Desk. Did I detect a little bit of disappointment there when all of a sudden JD Vance kind of started pulling away at kind of about the 8 o'clock hour or so? Were you surprised that this turned into kind of a comfortable win for him, about a 7-8 point win?
You know, I think we had some members of the panel who were more disappointed than others. Personally, I didn't think Vance was the worst of the field personally. I thought some of the comments made by Josh Mandel and, a lot of the stuff that he was saying to try and gain primary support, I thought would actually hurt him more in a general election than anything JD Vance has said so far. But I was surprised at how comfortable it was becoming. I don't think we expected the election day vote to go that heavily for Vance as it did in a lot of key counties. He overtook Matt Dolan, who ended up finishing third. In a lot of counties through election day vote, where Dolan led with the early vote, and then when election day vote started coming in, that's where Vance had overtaken him in a couple of key counties and around the Dayton and Cleveland areas. So I think I was surprised by the margin in the end. I wasn't necessarily surprised in the result. Vance, after the Trump endorsement, had become one of the three favorites. It was pretty clearly, by the end of the week, a three-way race between him, Mandel, and Matt Dolan. And in the end, I think those undecideds that were left, they looked at the Trump endorsement and said, you know what, JD Vance is our guy. I'm going to go in there on election day. I'm going to check his name by the ballot. And, it was a race that was close, but it was, I think, the margin of victory for Vance still shows, I think, the effect of the Trump endorsement, maybe not to the level it used to be, but still shows that effect there and how it can really change a campaign around, especially considering before that endorsement, Vance was pretty clearly languishing around third, fourth place.
Yeah, and this one was really clear when I was watching y'all's coverage on elections-daily.com on the YouTube channel. It was really clear cut because, of course, the first returns you get on an election, the way we do things nowadays, is the early voting comes in first, and then you're waiting for the election day stuff, especially the way Ohio had it set up. And it was exactly like you said, just as soon as the election day stuff started coming in, especially Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland area, as soon as the election day, it was really apparent within 15, 20 minutes, those first 3 or 4 returns, that, oh yeah, the election day had swung to Vance. With credit where it's due, that's got to be the Trump endorsement, because like you said, Vance bounced between third and fourth. He was second a couple times. Gibbons took the lead for a while. Mandel had a lead for a while. Dolan kind of had a late surge in a way. There's just no other way to do this. I don't think JD Vance wins this without that endorsement.
No, I think there was a lot of criticism from people who likes who like Trump, and also people who don't like him the whole bunch, but people in my circle who work in both and work in that area who say, Vance was not really running the best campaign until he got the Trump endorsement. A lot of people agree that's where that was really turning around. Without that endorsement, if Trump endorses someone else like a Mandel or a Gibbons or if he had stayed out of it completely. I don't think JD Vance is the nominee currently, but that's not the world we're living in. And it shows, I think, the extent that the Trump endorsement works currently. And I think it shows how important it is in such a split field like we had in Ohio. I mean, we can't forget Mike Gibbons still got around 13% of the vote as well, which is not in such a highly competitive race. It's certainly not a a bad number, and it's not a number that didn't have an effect on this race.
Yeah, Vance won with about 32, 33%. That'll get refined upwards. Let's call it 35-ish. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, but it's a split field, like you said. Okay, let's preview the race. Tim Ryan won very comfortably. He won 70-30-ish. What does that race look like in Ohio? He's trying to moderate. He's trying to do kind of the classic moderate, blue collar, a little more Youngstown than DC kind of sort of thing for Ohio. How's he going to match up with the new populist nativist JD Vance, who is coming off a big win?
You know what? I still think Ohio is going to be one of the hardest states for Democrats to do anything in 2022. You know, it was a state that voted pretty relatively to the right of the nation in 2020, actually. I mean, even though the margin between Trump and Biden was basically the same as it was between Trump and Hillary in 2016, you know, we have to remember the country moved 3 points to the left in terms of nationwide popular vote in 2020 compared to 2016. So Ohio is actually more to the right of the nation in 2020 than it was in 2016. You know, this is just a state that's really become very, very hard for Democrats to win. There's not really expansion in the right areas. Parts of suburban areas, and mostly, especially the exurbs in Ohio, are very, very deep red. You still have some very populous areas like Mahoning, where Youngstown is, and around the Akron and Canton areas that are trending Republican, and these areas do have a lot of people in them. Ohio has truly kind of been the basin of this white working class vote, trending to Republicans, kind of like Iowa has kind of lost its swing state vote, swing state status in the last 2 years. It's become more of a Republican tinged state compared to, 2004, 2008, 2012. So, I think it's gonna be really hard. I think Tim Ryan is definitely the best that Democrats could have gotten in terms of that race, but especially with Mike DeWine winning renomination, he's heading up that governor's ticket again. You look at the number in total votes between the two primaries. I just don't see it in Ohio. I think Vance wins relatively comfortably, probably around 8 to 10 points. I think, Ryan, I think does overperform the margins that I think we could see in the governor's race. But I think it's going to be very, very hard for him to pull out a win. And the fundamentals are really just not there for him.
Yeah, I mentioned Youngstown on purpose because Joe Szymanski from Elections Daily joining us. I mentioned Youngstown on purpose because I know you guys, you love your numbers and you love your swing counties. Mahoning County, which is Youngstown Alliance, that's one of the biggest swing counties in the country. They went Obama, huge Trump, huge back to Biden. Eye-popping numbers, 30, 40 point swings. Isn't that indicative of just how volatile Ohio has been over the last few years? And is that where you start talking about, man, I don't know if Tim Ryan can keep this to single digits or not unless JD Vance shoots himself in the foot?
Yeah, I think that's really going to be the issue. And this is where why I do think that actually Vance was a better nominee for Republicans than I think Josh Mandel was. Vance, as much as he's run in a certain way, we cannot forget is still a very well-educated individual who, is a Yale graduate. This is not a guy who's going to shoot himself in the foot on a debate stage against Tim Ryan. In college, he would have been in that situation. He's gone on book tours before. He understands how to talk to people. It's not a hard thing to see, I think Vance do better. I think it's not a hard thing to see him do well. And I really do think that, we Democrats are kind of overestimating the idea that Vance is going to somehow underperform compared to the norm that we're starting to see in Ohio. I think that's actually kind of an overrated statement compared to some of the analysts.
Now, I would ask you about the Ohio House races, except we didn't have any. We only had one or two because the maps got hung up in court. Is this something we're going to be seeing in other states? I know a couple of years ago in North Carolina, we did 3 elections in 18 months because of the court rulings on maps. Are we going to see this in other places going forward? Because a lot of these states, there's still some court holdups. This is probably more dramatic in Ohio than some of these other states are going to be, but is this something we still need to keep an eye on?
Well, yeah, obviously, while Ohio, by basically sheer force of refusing to listen to the state Supreme Court, did get their House of Representatives elections to their congressional maps and their congressional elections going last night. But their state House and state Senate races, unlike Indiana, were not able to be completed because those maps still have not been passed yet. We're going to see this problem kind of probably come up in New York, where it looks like they've pushed back congressional and state Senate races back to August. But right now it seems like they're going to keep their statewide and state assembly races in the earlier date because of court orders there so far. This is a possibility in Missouri. This is a possibility maybe even in Kansas, where we're still playing around with court and map issues. This is not an issue that's gone away, surprisingly, as this issue's become much more bloody in the way of redistricting. It's not something that we've gotten rid of yet. So New York really is kind of the state to watch right now, where we could see, again, separate elections for key races within the summer time period. So, it's certainly still something that's going on. And, it'll be interesting to see if it happens anywhere else.
Yeah. You mentioned Governor DeWine won very comfortably. There were some protest votes, but that race was not in doubt. Nan Wally will match up against him. It's former Dayton mayor. What line do you put on that? Is that pretty much safe? Is it lean? What do you think for the Governor DeWine?
I think for Governor DeWine, it's pretty safe. He's had some issues with as we saw last night, he did get under 50% of the total vote last night because of other candidates involved in the race. His margin of victory was around 20 points, I believe, over Jim Renacci in that race. I think DeWine is fine. Most people believe DeWine will win comfortably. Republicans, they may have been frustrated with him, but they're not very likely to be so frustrated with him that they vote him out, or don't go the vote for him because they're going to be turning out for other races. DeWine's popular. He's just kind of the similar model, I think, of Rod Portman in 2016. He's going to be very hard to beat. Nan Whaley's not a bad candidate, I think, by any means. She's been seen as a rising star, but I think her place in the future could be potentially in a Dayton-based congressional seat if a fair map is drawn. I don't think it'll be the governor's office. We have this currently rated as safe Republican, and it's pretty hard for me to see that changing.
All right, there was an undercard election that is more Twitter famous than in real life famous, but you and I are Twitter animals, so we're going to talk about it for a second. Nina Turner, this was a replay of the special election. A lot of people thought this would be closer than it was. She is a Bernie Sanders AOC in that vein of progressives, and she got absolutely trucked, 70-30 type of split in that. I don't even know how to really explain that because I didn't think she'd win, but I didn't think it was going to be that bad. Is this one of those Twitter ain't real life moments for our progressive friends of like, okay, you can't just trot people out? And I bring it up because I thought your co-host made an excellent point on the broadcast on Elections Daily last night. She didn't run any TV ads. She just tried to do turn out the vote stuff. That model just ain't going to work, is it?
Yeah, it was the same issues that we saw on the special, multiplied by 10. Brown with the incumbency now, she hasn't had any type of scandals or anything. There's been no problems with Charlotte Talbrell as a congresswoman in Cleveland. Turner probably lost some area that was good to her in the Akron area under this map. This seat is now just entirely Cuyahoga County and Cleveland. No longer takes in parts of Summit County and Akron. It wasn't a big part, but it was a part that Turner did better in, so she lost some support there. It's not very necessarily easy for me to say that, Nina Turner really had a chance. And it doesn't seem like she learned it all from her race back in the summer regarding the special election. She was kind of just there. And once again, thought, we have this idea among, I think, grassroots that if you just can get out enough of our support and you just knock doors, you're going to be able to win races. That's not really how these things work. You have to get on TV and you have to get out ads and you have to get out flyers. If you don't do that, you're not going to see success.
Yeah, Joe Szymanski, Elections Daily. They do great breakdown work. Make sure you go to elections-daily.com. All kinds of great stuff. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, these primaries are going to start coming hot and heavy the rest of May. Pretty much every Tuesday, we're going to be doing some voting. We're going to run through those with him. We'll put a bow on Ohio and neighboring Indiana. Had a couple interesting tidbits to talk about. More with Joe Szymanski on Heard Tell right after this. Welcome back to Heard Tell. Joe Szymanski still joining us, elections-daily.com. He does great work over there with them. Highly recommend them. Been with them since they first started out, was with them when they got shut down in the middle of an election. We talk about that some other time. They've bounced back. They are now partnered with Decision Desk HQ. They're big time, but good guys that just kind of said, hey, we can cover elections better. And they go out and do it. Make sure you follow and support them. Okay, real quick, we talked about Ohio. Next door in Indiana, though, there was a couple things. What did you see in Indiana? Is there any notable tidbits we need to grab from there?
Really, there were two key Republican primaries in Indiana. One was in Indiana's first district. I'll mention this one first because it was the least close of these two key races. That seat's been drawn. It's only about a Biden +7 seat. We have it rated as leans Democratic right now with incumbent Frank Mervan. Jennifer Ruth Green won the Republican nomination there pretty decisively with over half the vote, I believe. She's a former vet. She's a veteran and Republican activist in the area. She's someone who can definitely put the seat into play for Republicans come 2022 in the House races. Definitely one of probably the best nominee we've seen in what is a right trending seat in this Northwest Indiana, which is one of the more right trending areas of the country. It's gonna be really interesting to see how this race shapes out. Ruth Green is expected to get some pretty heavy monetary backing from both the NRCC and other Republican groups. It'll be really fascinating to see how this group goes and how this race goes now that it's between Mervan and Ruth Green as a Republican nominee. But the closer race, though, and the one that was more interesting, I think, was the Indiana 09 primary. This is a safe Republican seat, but incumbent Congressman Trey Hollingsworth retired this year. He did not run for re-election. So it was basically up between Aaron Houchin, who's a state senator from Indiana, who was endorsed by Elise Stefanik and her PAC, and then Mike Sudrell, who was the former representative from this area when it was much more swingy. He represented this area from 2004 to 2006, and he was endorsed by the Freedom Caucus. But Houchin actually got the victory here by about 10, 11 points, I believe, over Sudrell. This is a safe Republican seat. Houchin is another one of many Republican candidates we've seen, especially female ones, in recent cycles, endorsed by Elise Stefanik and her PAC, that have seen success in primaries. That's a good win for Stefanik, and definitely gets her foot soldier in the caucus for her. Again, Houchin will be a safe RC. Houchin will be elected here almost without any doubt.
All right, next up, May the 10th, Nebraska and West Virginia. West Virginia is an interesting one, not just because I'm a West Virginia homer, but because you have a semi-rare incumbent versus incumbent. Because of redistricting, they're losing my home district, the 3rd district. They're going down to just 2 districts. And Nebraska, anything in either of those races that jump out at you?
Really, I think there's a key race in each state. Obviously, you mentioned the incumbent versus incumbent race in West Virginia for the new 1st district. That'll be David McKinley versus Alex Mooney. Actually, I believe it's the new 2nd district. Actually, excuse me, they changed the way they did.
Second. You're right.
They did the numbering. They had the southmost district, now represented by Carol Miller, is now the 1st, and the 2nd is now the combo of McKinley and Mooney's old districts. This is going to be a fascinating race. Mooney has has positioned himself as the more right-wing candidate. McKinley has positioned himself as the more maybe more establishment candidate. I can't say moderate. David McKinley is definitely not a moderate. One of the big issues that these guys diverge upon is actually the infrastructure bill. McKinley voted for it while Mooney voted against it. This is kind of an interesting race, and it will be very interesting to see kind of how we go through localities and interest in West Virginia. One of the attacks that's been routinely used on Mooney is that he's a carpetbagger. He was actually a state legislator in Maryland for quite a while before deciding to pack up his things just over the border between Maryland and West Virginia to get over to become a congressman in 2014. Mooney has actually routinely underperformed considering the numbers in his congressional seat, actually probably compared to what a generic West Virginia Republican would do. But polling so far has been all over the place. Most of it has shown a slight Mooney lead, but we haven't gotten any polling since late winter period in this race. So we're kind of going in a bit blind. I'd say Mooney's probably slightly favored, but if regional interests take hold, I could very easily see McKinley pull this one out narrowly. And then we move over to Nebraska. Incumbent Governor Pete Ricketts, a Republican, is term limited. That means there's going to be a big race, of course, there in the primary for governor. It's kind of between three candidates right now. Brett Lidstrom, who's on the more moderate side of the Nebraska GOP. He's been endorsed by moderate Democrats, Bob Christ and Brad Ashford. Ashford has actually now recently passed away, so may he rest in peace. But then there's also a very controversial figure and businessman and big-time Trump donor, Charles Herbster. He was gotten Trump's endorsement. Trump actually recently did a rally for him there in Nebraska. But Herbster has come under tens of over 10 accusations of sexual assault from female members of the Nebraska Senate and Nebraska politics. That's been a problem for him. And then there's Jeff Pillen, who's the endorsed by current Governor Rickens. He's been the leader right now in recent polling, but it's been very narrow between those top three. So we're kind of flying blind there as well. I don't believe there's been any independent polling of this race from. Mainly Trafalgar was the big one. We'll see if they release a poll of this race or not before next week. But if they don't, we're going to be kind of flying blind with only internals to look at. So it'll be really fascinating to see kind of where this goes. That one and the McKinley versus Mooney primary are by far and away the two to watch on May 10th. Which is kind of a nice little amuse-bouche pre-starter to what we're going to get on May 17th.
Yeah, and May 17th, Idaho, Kentucky, and Oregon. It's nice that they're coming to play, but let's be honest here, the two primetime mainline election, North Carolina and Pennsylvania. I know you're salivating over Pennsylvania because that's your backyard, but start with North Carolina. This is another one of those. Trump came out, he endorsed Ted Budd. I actually interviewed him a couple of weeks ago for radio. That really upset the state party, kind of what you're going to hear about from Ohio, same thing. Really upset the state party folks when he did that. He didn't tell them ahead of time. He just picked Ted Budd. Ted Budd looks like he's in position to win that race now. North Carolina, big deal. And then, of course, Pennsylvania is really a mess, and that's your backyard, so you can tee that one up for us.
Yeah, well, starting with North Carolina, there's really going to be two key primaries to watch. Actually, three, I think, should be mentioned. Number one is, of course, the Senate primary, but it does seem like we've seen Ted Budd start to pull away. Budd started campaigning more. He started putting more ads on television. He's starting to pull away from former Governor Pat McCrory, who's, to my knowledge, trying to kind of desperately gain some last-second attempts here to get over Budd. Doesn't seem to be working. I've personally, from my own personal opinion, I always kind of thought that I would like Budd more than McCrory, just because Budd is kind of your typical generic Republican. In North Carolina, it does well. McCrory has a history as governor. He's got a pretty big legislative record there, and he also lost in 2016 as Trump was winning the state in that governor's race to current Governor Cooper of North Carolina, who's a Democrat. So, there's questions there, I think, about McCrory and electability and maybe would he put deceit into play. I think Budd is a decent enough favorite right now. I would probably give him 80-20 odds to win this race, quite honestly, barring a shocker. It would be pretty hard to see Budd not win this race. And then I think really the other key one is the North Carolina's new 13th congressional district, the primaries there. That's the new competitive seat in the Sandhills area through the redistricting process. That'll be a very fascinating one to watch. Bo Hines is the Trump endorsed candidate there, but he's come under a lot of accusations about carpetbagging. People said he's run a poor campaign. Again, a race we haven't really seen a whole lot of polling there for a race that's only there in 2 weeks. Again, kind of flying blind right now. I don't really know who's going to be the favorite there. But it's also a fair thing to mention right now, North Carolina's 11th district, Madison Cawthorn, who's had what someone probably call last 2 weeks of hell from April. He's had just felt like scandal after scandal came out about Cawthorn, as Tom Tillis has put a lot of energy into State Senator Chuck Edwards' campaign to try and knock off Cawthorn. That's definitely one to watch. Still, Cawthorn has lost ground in polling, it looks like, compared to where he was previously before Tillis started gaining support for Edwards. That one will still be interesting to watch, I think, come May 17th.
Yeah, Cawthorn got code-redded by the Republican establishment. There's no doubt that they've decided to run him off because he's got one or two decent primary challengers that anybody would take over him. Also, maybe more stuff coming out on him soon. All right. Try to contain your excitement. The Keystone State, Pennsylvania. The Senate's up, the House is up, the governor's up. Let's start with the Senate. Does anybody really have a good handle on what's going on in this Senate race?
At this moment, there does seem to be three candidates right now to watch. That's the Trump-endorsed candidate and Dr. Mehmet Oz, the famous TV TV host, David McCormick, a businessman from the Pittsburgh area, and Kathy Barnett, a conservative commentator from Montgomery County. This is going to be a really fascinating race to watch here. Oz has the Trump endorsement, but he got that relatively early. He got that back in early April. Polling since then hasn't really shown him pulling away. Hopefully, we're going to see some Trafalgar results from the state of Pennsylvania soon, hopefully before the end of this week. We've been told there's a poll coming in both the GOP primary for Senate and for governor. So hopefully we're going to get some more accurate results soon. But the real issue I would have to say right now is that Oz probably just because of that Trump endorsement has a little bit of that favorite, but it's certainly not a closed deal. There was certainly some anger among Republican base conservatives because Barnett is kind of running on this three-way ticket with controversial figures in Doug Mastriano and Teddy Daniels. They're kind of running as this three-way ticket, so Barnett has that kind of groundswell of support. But Oz still has the Trump endorsement. That's still probably kingmaker. McCormick is certainly still a player. He's the only one that comes from the western side of the state. Pennsylvania in primaries has a history of geographic voting because we put counties next to people's names on the primary ballot. So that's going to be key there too. Still certainly a race to watch.
We're going to skip down to the wrong date, 24th, Alabama, Arkansas, the Texas runoff for Attorney General. That's the George P. Bush versus Ken Paxton. That'll be something to pay attention to for a couple of interesting little side points because you have Bush dynasty versus sitting under indictment. That'll be a fun one. But let's be honest. The headliner there is one of the races. I've called this the race to watch in the midterms to kind of tell how all this is going to go, especially when it comes to the involvement of one Donald J. Trump. Georgia, this is going to be a very interesting race. They've got the Senate, the House, the governor, Attorney General, the Secretary of State. Of course, all that goes back to those Georgia runoffs and all the mess that went on there. Let's start with Governor. Trump came out and endorsed Perdue. Perdue is getting run off the board by Governor Brian Kemp. That race looks like it's over.
Yeah. In fact, post-Trump endorsement, we've rarely seen this Republican primary. So this is where some people are wondering how much effect the Trump endorsement is having in places that have been more typically Republican versus places that have gone Republican in the Trump era. So this is where we're seeing the difference between a state like Georgia and a state like Ohio and the primary voters there. Since that Trump endorsement, Perdue has actually fallen in the polling compared to where he was pre-Trump endorsement. That's because of two debates where Perdue was routinely outclassed by Brian Kemp. Kemp, has just really, I'm repeating myself, but he just outclassed Perdue in both debates. Since then, Kemp's been routinely polling around 55 to 58% of the vote, which would get him through the runoff position here for that primary here. That would be a big deal. That would put him on the level of Herschel Walker, who seems pretty in that GOP Senate primary, seems pretty likely to avoid a runoff. It seems to have always been likely to avoid a runoff right now. But that if Kemp is a clear winner, that could have effects down the ballot, really in every place except the Secretary of State's race, where it does seem like Brad Raffensperger is going to finish second to Congressman Jody Heiss in that primary, and then likely losing the runoff, one would say.
Yeah, but to his credit, though, he was supposed to be DOA and not get 3 votes in the whole state. Yeah. He's made that race competitive, which is interesting enough, but talk about that some other time. All right, the other piece of this, you just mentioned Herschel Walker. This will be Senator Raphael Warnock. He's actually the junior senator from Georgia just because he ran in the special elections. It's funny how these things work out. This is really, really close to when we did this in the Georgia runoff. That race got ugly. It got personal. Walker is up by a couple points in most polling. Once this goes to head-to-head, how do you see that race shaking out?
Same as 2020. It's going to get ugly. It's going to get expensive. We forget that Georgia in those runoff periods in the span of about a month, we saw about 500 between the two runoff races for the Senate. We saw about $500 million in spending on these races, which, come on, that's $500 million. That's a crazy amount to spend on even two things. That's a crazy number to spend. It's going to get nasty. It's going to get expensive in Georgia. Atlanta's an expensive market. There's a lot of media markets you have to target across the state. It's going to get nasty. It's going to get expensive. But there is kind of this wonder if we're going to see that swing back in Georgia, either in just heightened Republican turnout in the rural areas and maybe a slight swing back in some of those Atlanta suburbs. We forget that Georgia was still a very, very narrow state in 2020. It's going to be interesting to see how people perform in this race and how Walker performs against Warnock. This is going to be really kind of one of those headliner races for 2022 for sure.
Yeah, we were talking to our friend Jason Downey just a couple of episodes ago. He said it is huge for Brian Kemp to get through without doing a runoff. We know him and Abrams too we assume it's going to be close. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be loud. This is going to be a rematch for the ages as far as governor electoral politics go. Do you agree with him? Is it a really, really important deal for him to avoid a runoff here?
It causes less time in the primary. You don't have to spend money on a primary anymore. It would be a big deal if Kemp avoids a runoff. That means you run right into the general election. That would give him about 4 months basically to just go head on against Abrams. That's exactly what he wants. And if he's able to do that, that's a big deal and would probably be a minus for Stacey Abrams and her campaign, considering that Kemp is now the incumbent in this potentially our favored year. It would be hard for me to say that Kemp would not really, really enjoy a nice little boost in all regards in terms of how this race is going to go if he is able to avoid a runoff.
Abrams versus Kemp. Give me a number.
Kemp 54, Abrams 46.
That wide?
I think it could be.
All right. Walker and Warnock.
Walker 51.5, Warnock 49.
That's margin of error, my friend. You sure?
Yep.
That close. We already talked about Heinz is probably going to get the Secretary of State. If Trump doesn't play nice with Brian Kemp, how would that affect this race?
That's a really good question. Because it would be an unprecedented thing, really, to see a former president go very hard against a person who would have won his party's nomination. That would be an unprecedented thing if that were to occur. And I know I hate to say this, but I really don't know how that would go if Trump would, as he's threatened to do many times, just endorse Stacey Abrams because he hates Brian Kemp that much. You wonder who would go for that, and that would really kind of change the effect of things. It would be an unprecedented thing. It would be an unprecedented decision in terms of politics. One where I really do not know how that would go.
He doesn't have to endorse her. He just has to go after Kemp. That the same effect. The Georgia runoff effect, and here we go again. I don't know that that's going to happen either. He says he's going to do it. So I think this is going to be the race to watch in the midterms, especially when we start projecting 2024 and how much stroke President Trump's still going to have going forward. We'll see, my friend Joe Szymanski. He does outstanding work. All the folks at election-daily.com. We have him on. We have Sarah Stook comes on, who does those great his story pieces. They've got great stuff over there. Let folks know about elections-daily.com and your social media where they can follow you until we have you back in a couple of weeks, because you're going to be a regular this summer, buddy. We're going to pencil you in right now.
You can find us as Andrew's been saying all day at elections-daily.com. That's our website where you can also sign up for a weekly newsletter that gives you all of our articles from the week, but you can find us on social media at elections_daily. All of our YouTube live streams that we do on our YouTube election, also just named Elections Daily, also get live streamed directly to our Twitter account as well if you're more interested in watching us there. So give us a like and a follow, and you can find me personally at Joseph Szymanski, all one word on Twitter. That's where you'll see me post most of my stuff and tweet out my analysis when election day comes around.
Yep, he does good work. They do great work. Someday when I'm all grown up, maybe I'll even sneak on one of their live streams with them. We will see. Joe Szymanski, thanks for the insight, buddy. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.